Okej, då är vi redo att köra. I'm happy to introduce Özlem Yüze. I met her in Gothenburg 5 years ago. Saw a presentation at another conference, and I was really impressed. And I've been following her area of expertise since then, and also had a few other workshops and seen other lectures in the same area. And I'm very happy that we got her to fly in here for this conference. So, please.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay, that's good. So maybe I should start with a little bit of introduction. I hate introducing myself, but I think it gives a bit more context about what my background is. I started my career as in customer service, and I moved to product management afterwards. And I lived in like 7 different countries, including Denmark, working for Maersk Line, giant container shipping company. Yeah, and over the last 3 years, I have been consulting with lots of different clients, public and private, and I have also been helping out different clients in terms of understanding the value and urgency of the things that they have been working on, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So in order to help us get started, I have a little icebreaker for you guys. So I'm going to ask you to imagine that you're going to be stuck in a desert island for next 5 years. Yeah? So imagine, desert island, you're on your own. So the question for you is, if you could take one thing with you, what would that one thing be? So that's the question. I would like you to discuss with your neighbor for a couple of minutes. Okay, that's good. Cool. Anyone who would like to share? You don't want to share it? Okay. Anyone? Any volunteers? Anyone brave?
I don't think I would last 5 days, no matter what.
Some sort of cutting tool. Swiss Army knife is kind of like a... Anyone who else said Swiss Army knife? Yeah, from people. Yeah, that's a very common answer. Anyone else? Anyone? Anything else? Another person. Okay, yes. Or maybe Wilson. I think he had Wilson, isn't it? Okay. Anyone? Anything else?
Sailing boat.
Sailing boat. Okay, that's more than one thing, probably. But yeah, one boat. Yes. Okay. Okay, cool. So hopefully you have something identified, because the next question is going to be related to that. So unfortunately, the baggage handlers lost your item. So you're on the island now, and you're stuck. So the question now is, how much would you be willing to pay in order to get your item back? How much would you be willing to pay? So think about it. Again, discuss with your neighbor. Hopefully quantify. Just, yeah, try to come up with a monetary value. Anyone would like to share? Any numbers? How much would you be willing to pay? A lot, yeah. Can you identify a lot, like how much? 500,000, okay. Yes, just a number. You okay? Anyone else? Yes?
It depends. It's depending on your survival.
Mhm.
Probably everything I own. Yeah, this too.
Yes, everything I own. Yes, that's a very good answer. Yes, that's very good. Anyone else? Was it difficult to come up with a number? Yes, very hard. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the answer that I get most of the times. All my life savings, my 5 years worth salary or whatever, so that people immediately think about, I'm trying to get, survive or get rid of escape from the island. So, which is good. So this is actually one of the ways we can put a value onto something. So we try to estimate value by using willingness to pay. So there's another way, willingness to compensate. Are you guys familiar with any companies, any kind of businesses that would actually evaluate value by using willingness to compensate? Insurance? They're able to put a value on people's lives, isn't it? By willingness to compensate. So some people wrongly think that economics is all about money, but it's actually not. It is the study of scarcity, the choices we make, and how those choices define value. So let's think about product development and consider the supply side in product development. So if only product development was like a tap, so you turn it on and the capacity flows, right? Whereas that's not the case. In reality, the product development is not like a tap. You can't turn it on and off. So let's say you have a team with a sustainable capacity, so you have some throughput. If you stop, then it takes a while to recover that capacity. It takes time to build high-performance teams. Yeah? Is that kind of in line with your experience as well? I mean, in my experience, it takes 3 to 6 months to really get going. And if you look at some of the real cases, this was presented a couple of years ago by Dimitar at a conference. And you can see that it really reflects the learning curve. Yeah? It takes time to build capacity and performance for the team. It takes around 3 to 6 months. So the reality reflects the same as well. So that was the supply side. So let's have a look at the demand side. And the demand side, most of the times, feels a bit like this. You have lots of stakeholders, hopefully as nice looking as they are, and they all want a piece of you. Yeah? And most of the times, they're pulling in different directions. They have conflicting priorities. And everything their feature, their projects are all #1 priority. So does this sound familiar to you guys? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So the question we're trying to answer is, how do we survive in a world where stakeholders want everything, and even worse, they want it yesterday? Yeah? So let me ask you again, how do your teams prioritize? Any techniques, any methods? How do you prioritize? You don't prioritize? You must be prioritizing. No techniques? No ways? Anyone who's attempting to quantify value? Yes, a little bit going on. Okay, cool. So we have seen different prioritization mechanisms with varying degrees of success. So one of them is the Moscow. Is anyone familiar with the Moscow way? Okay, so can you tell me what is the challenge with Moscow? What is the pitfall with Moscow? What's wrong with Moscow prioritization?
Everything ends up in Moscow.
Exactly, everything is a must-have, right? So it's very, very common that everything ends up in the must-have bucket. Yes. Another way we have seen is equity model, which we would like to call as the equity model. So we want to be fair. So every department gets a share of the budget, and then it is basically a fair split. But it is blind to value. And also, most of the times, you kind of like see these cases where different departments are fighting for the same resource. So everyone needs a UX resource, for instance, right? So you're kind of like creating conflicting priorities by giving them a fair share of the budget. And another prioritization technique that I would like to introduce is what I like to call the Eurovision model. Is anyone familiar with the Eurovision Song Contest? Yes. Apparently Sweden won 6 times, and they kind of like, you guys have been in the top 5 for 23 times, one of the most successful countries ever, apparently, which is very good. I quite like ABBA, by the way. So, Eurovision is at least funny, right? So, the reason why I call it the Eurovision model is because this is all about, like, favoring the friends. I mean, Eurovision, you vote for the neighbors, probably, as well. So you're kind of like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I mean, at least Eurovision is a bit more cultural and funny event. Whereas in most of the companies, this is basically about like political games and trying to get your stuff to prioritize. So that's one way. And one of the last ones that I would like to talk about is the BCR high jump. So this is when you do a lot of calculations in your business case, you calculate the benefit-cost ratio, net present value. You spend a lot of time doing a lot of calculations, and it's most of the times when you have a business case and you have stated your calculation and assumptions, you go to someone, you present it. It is more like the response you get is, okay, this part, it doesn't work for us, do a bit more calculations. So you basically just go back and do more. So it's kind of like a vicious circle that you find yourself in. So it's about getting lots of details. But it's not a no, it's kind of like a high jump. It is still a yes, but it takes a while to get there. And most of the times, these kind of prioritization methods end up in situations like this. So you have, in this case, this is kind of the work in progress across a whole portfolio of items. As you can see, there's a lot going on upstream of prioritization, around 3,000 items. So it's like 3 times more than what's going on in development. Oh, actually 10 times. So lots of going on. And we kind of like tend to call this the fuzzy front end of product development. And if you have a situation like this with lots of work in progress, so if you look at your lead times from when you have an idea to having that launched in production, it probably is taking a long time to get there. So this is kind of the lead time analysis for Maersk Line when we have done it quite a few years ago. And as you can see, there are a few items that are taking less than 30 days, but this is mostly like errors and bugs and smaller items. And on average, you can't see the average here, but it's mostly 150 days. So from when an idea is captured to having that launched in production, it is taking a long time in this case. And lots of bigger items and more strategic things are on the right side, unfortunately, taking even longer. So what do we want? So we want a prioritization mechanism that focuses on value and urgency. We want to enable better trade-off decisions in our portfolio of products and features, and we want to change the focus of conversation from cutting costs to focusing on value. So one of the challenges is value can be a very nebulous term. It's hard to nail down and reach a broad agreement about what value is. And it is kind of like a non-deterministic, stochastic process because you can't really see into the future. You don't have a crystal ball and you can't really determine what's going to end up being very, very valuable, fortunately. But we can't close our eyes and imagine that the problem doesn't exist, because there is still lots of demand, and the demand is outstripping our capacity to deliver change. So you have to manage demand somehow, yeah? So at the very least, you need to figure out where to start. You can't have it all, so where do we start? And most importantly, you need to figure out when to stop and move on to something more valuable than what you're working on. And understanding value alone is not going to be enough. You need to understand urgency as well. Yeah? So, and here is why. So this is a feature that was delivered into production. This is an actual feature that we delivered at Maersk Line in the finance portfolio. So you can see that the idea is captured on day one, and then it waits for 18 weeks until there is a proof of concept, which takes only 24 hours. And then there's 11 weeks more waiting, and then it goes on to development and testing, which is 82 hours, and 9 weeks of waiting afterwards, and then it goes live. In total, 38 weeks of waiting. So it is quite a bit of waiting time. But the problem here is you can't really quantify the cost of these queues until you quantify the cost of delay. So in this case, we actually calculated the cost of delay of this feature after it was delivered into production. So it was actually costing us 210,000 per week for every week that was delayed, yeah? And in total, I think it's around like $7 million if you look at the amount of delay. It's quite massive. And if you look at the whole industry, unfortunately, we are very much focused on the efficiency part of this, the process, the development and testing. So we're focused on dev and test efficiency. We want more efficiency and more flow. Whereas the lion's share of waiting is in the fuzzy front end. Yeah? And we call this the urgency paradox. Somehow it becomes urgent when it gets to development and testing, whereas the cost of delay hasn't really changed. So somehow it's not urgent, and then it gets urgent. It's very bizarre. So maybe that's why Don Reinertsen says, if you only quantify one thing, quantify the cost of delay. So what is cost of delay? The way I would like to explain it is, it's basically the impact of time on outcomes we would hope to achieve. Yeah? And to help people get started thinking about cost of delay, I kind of tell them that I have a magic wand in my bag which instantly delivers the feature or the project that they are working on. Yeah? And then I follow up with a few questions afterwards. What would it be worth to us if we had that product right now, if we had that feature right now? Or if you have like a nominal delivery date or a deadline, you can basically turn the question around and ask, what would it be worth to us if we had it 1 month earlier? It actually tests if this deadline is a real deadline or not. If you can make money now by delivering that product, probably it is not a real deadline, yeah? Or you can turn the question around and ask, what would it cost us if we got it 1 month later? So at least these questions help people to get started thinking about cost of delay. In order to get to cost of delay, we need to think about value and urgency. So we need to get to value first. So we kind of came up with a very simple framework to help people to start thinking about what value means. So we have 4 buckets, 2 on the revenue side, 2 on the cost side. So increase revenue. So these could be like new features or new products in your portfolio that you will add in order to get new customers or increase share of wallet with your current customers. You're trying to go after a new market share. And again, protect revenue. So you need to somehow keep delighting your current customers, your existing customers, so that they keep returning to you for more business. So project revenue is kind of like about the features that will help you do that. So you need to keep delighting your customers. You're trying to sustain your current market share. And on the cost side, we have again 2 buckets. Reducing cost. This is kind of the easiest one to estimate because we have data concrete data about these things. So these are costs that you are incurring right now. And if you can do something about it, these costs will disappear, or you can reduce these costs. So you're trying to be more efficient with your business. Avoiding costs. So these are improvements to sustain your current cost base. So costs that you're not incurring right now, but you may incur those costs if you don't do something now, yeah? Some of the times, most of the times, regulatory requirements go into the avoid cost bucket, in my experience. Any questions so far? No questions? Okay, moving on. So then we kind of like take every feature or every idea that we are working on and we ask why. So why should we do this? So you need to ask why enough times to reveal one or more of these buckets. And if you can't estimate the value, then is it actually worthless? You need to turn around and ask yourself if it is worth this. So ideally, you should get to one or more of these buckets and make your assumptions visible. And you can use a couple of tactics in order to get to the buckets. So for example, you're trying to automate a process. You can make the value equal to the cost of the alternatives. So the alternative here is the current manual cost, yeah? Or cost of the human error, which goes into 2 buckets on the cost side. Or alternatively, you can estimate the value of the effects of the change. For example, improving invoicing clarity and accuracy. It is kind of going to reduce payment delays because our customers are more likely to understand the invoices we send to them, so that we can actually start making interest on the payment. We can get payments on time. That would increase revenue. It would make it easier for our customers to pay the correct amount. That would protect revenue because our customers are less likely to leave us and go somewhere else. It would reduce cost because we would use less employee time processing customer inquiries and complaints, yeah? So it goes on to 3 of these buckets that we have discussed. So we talked about the values. As I said, urgency is very, very important as well when we're trying to understand the cost of delay of our ideas. So we're going to look at some calculus. Yay, we're back to university. So on the y-axis we have benefits per week, and on the x-axis we have time. So let's say you launched a new product, yeah? A typical curve looks like this. It's like an S shape. So you kind of like a ramp up of benefits over time, and then it peaks and it goes into perpetuity, it flattens out. Yeah? Let's say you're 1 month delayed, yeah? So you have late entry. Again, the shape of the ramp up looks the same. It is again an S curve, and it goes into the same peak. So the difference between the 2 curves is your delay cost. And it's actually quite easy to, in this case, it is easy to calculate because it's just a parallelogram. So amount of late entry times peak benefit, you have your delay cost. So we tend to see different type of urgency profiles. So the first one is the one we have talked about, for benefits with a very long life cycle, with peak benefits unaffected by the delay. So for instance, automating the booking process or automating a particular process or efficiency ideas most of the times go into this bucket, this type of urgency profile. Yeah? Questions? No? Good. Making sure that you're with me. Okay, second one that we tend to see is for ideas with short life cycle and reduced peak due to late delivery. Can you come up with an example that goes into this urgency profile? I have a few smiles, probably.
Custom products like phones or something?
Exactly. Okay, that's good. Anyone who works at Ericsson, probably you guys have this type of urgency profiles, yeah? Okay, so another good example is fashion goods. So for instance, when I was working at Maersk Line, we used to work with Gap, you know Gap. So if we delay their containers, let's say for a week, they have to sell their goods with a discounted price, unfortunately. Yeah, so you kind of like have reduced the peak. So fashion is kind of very similar. Fast-moving consumer goods is very similar to this profile. So another one we tend to see is for benefits with a very long life cycle, again, but this time with a reduced peak due to later delivery. So in this case, if you're the first mover in the market, then you can dominate or monopolize the market. Or if you're late, like in this case, then you have a reduced peak forever. Any examples that you can come up with? Some examples, no? So PC operating systems is a good example of this. Or has anyone used Uber? Okay, Uber is kind of, this is still a hypothesis, but Uber is, in my view, going for this type of stickiness, this type of impact in the market. Any other examples? That's something that you use on a day-to-day basis? Spotify. Yeah, it could be actually. I'm not sure about Spotify, but yeah, it could be. Yeah, you're kind of locked in, right? You don't want to. I don't want to switch to anything else. Yeah. Another good example is Facebook. So probably because you're kind of, if you want to create a new social network, then you're a bit too late because Facebook has already dominated. But this doesn't mean that the monopoly cannot be disrupted. But the disruption is, in our view, it is still slower than expected, slower compared to these ones. Yeah. Okay. So the fourth one is a profile we see as well quite often, where you have an external deadline. This is an external deadline, though. We're not talking about the internal deadlines, project delivery deadlines that we set for ourselves. I'm sure you don't do it, but so you have an external deadline and an option expiry date, and the last responsible moment as to when you should start working on that idea. And this could actually come in the form of this, where you have an option expiry zone. It's not a date, but it's actually a zone. So for instance, I was working with Vistaprint. Do you know Vistaprint? Yeah. So they do a lot of like Christmas cards. So Christmas cards go into this type of category because you don't really have a certain date. Probably you're going to stop buying Christmas cards a few days before Christmas. So it's kind of like a zone. And if you're late, then you kind of like have a reduced peak. And after Christmas, it doesn't really matter anymore. So these are kind of the urgency profiles we tend to see. So we talked about value and urgency, but one of the things that I would like to highlight is that we shouldn't forget about the information discovery value. The reason for that is product development is a journey of discovery. If we only knew which way to go, so there is actually an information discovery value if we can know in advance which way to take. If we can avoid the cost of taking the wrong path. That's why the experiments we run to figure out if this product is going to make money out in the market, or if this architecture is going to scale, these type of questions, if we can actually experiment and find out before we take the wrong path, it's actually quite important to us. So quantifying the value of information is also key. So there are a few questions that you can ask yourself in order to quantify the information value. So what is it worth to avoid taking the wrong path if I can know that in advance? What is the cost to obtain this information firsthand? If I can buy the information out in the market, what would it be costing us? Or what am I willing to pay for this information if I can buy it? Yeah? So in our case, most of the times it goes into one of those 4 buckets, and probably the avoid cost bucket. Yeah? Any questions? Cool. So I have a few examples. These are all real examples of features that were delivered, and we calculated the cost of delay. So improve invoice accuracy. So that's one of the examples, one of the features. So this feature will help us reduce the number of customers paying late, and that's worth an additional 4 million per year. And it will reduce the number of calls. It is currently costing us 5 FTEs at 20K per FTE. So it goes on to 2 buckets: increase revenue and reduce cost. And if we delay this requirement by 1 week, it is worth us 80K per week. So that's the cost of delay. Okay. Another example, this time it has the same urgency profile, so long life cycle with a peak unaffected by delay, but it has an external deadline, yeah? And we will automate a process. There is a new regulation coming into play, which will be effective from 1st of September. So we will try to avoid the additional manual processing cost, which is estimated around 400K per year. And we have estimated that it's going to take about 13 weeks to automate. So delaying the start by 1 week beyond the last responsible moment of 1st of June is worth 8,000 per week. So we look at so we calculate the last responsible moment from the deadline minus the development time. So up until 1st of June, cost of delay is actually 0. And then it ramps up afterwards. So this is actually a very good technique, because most of the times people try to use the deadlines to drive urgency, whereas in this model, cost of delay is 0 until the last responsible moment. Yeah. Third example. So there will be another regulation coming into play, and we will have to do a change. And this was actually a real example again. And I remember when the product owner for this one came to the meeting. So if we don't satisfy this regulation, there will be a fine. But in this case, we hadn't been fined before. It's a new regulation, new port. We have no idea, yeah? And the product owner came to the table and said, okay, this is probably 20 million per week. And he got challenged by his colleagues, because he kind of forgot to estimate the probability of being fined. It's not like we will be fined for every vessel that we don't comply with the regulations. So we kind of estimated the probability of being fined at 20%, and we calculated our cost of delay based on that. And we shared our assumptions about it. So we went through 3 examples, different types of urgency profiles. So let's say if these take the same amount of time to deliver. So we have 3 features, 3 different cost of delays, but they are taking the same amount of time to deliver. Which one would you do first? It's a very easy decision, right? So you would go for the third one. However, in software development, this is rarely the case, right? It's very rare that things take the same amount of time to deliver. So in these cases, when the time required to deliver varies, we use cost of delay divided by duration, which we call as CD3. Yeah? So cost of delay, we have communicated the value and urgency, and duration is how long the pipeline is blocked. So let's have a little bit of comparison to see how CD3 helps us to make the right scheduling decisions. Oops, sorry. So let's take first in, first out scheduling. So we have 3 projects A, B, and C. They came in the order of A, B, and C. They have different cost of delays and durations and different CD3 scores, yeah? So when we are delivering A, we are incurring the cost of delay of A, B, and C. When we are delivering B, we're incurring the cost of delay of B and C. And when we are delivering C, we are incurring the cost of delay of C. So if we look at the total delay cost in our pipeline, it is 50K. Yeah? So this is the total delay cost in a given pipeline. So that was first in, first out scheduling, which is very common in manufacturing. But in manufacturing, the value and duration of the things are most of the times equal, which makes sense to do first in, first out scheduling. Whereas in product development, as we do, it is a bit different. So in this case, we need to prioritize using CD3. So the highest CD3 score in this case would be project B. We would then do C and A. So when we are delivering B, we're incurring the cost of delay of B, C, and A, and so on. So you can see that there is 84% reduction in delay cost in our pipeline. So CD3 is kind of the best scheduling mechanism in product development, in software development. And if you don't believe me, you can actually work out the maths yourself. When I was presented by this, I actually had to sit down because I'm an economist, so I had to sit down and work it out for myself to be able to explain to other people. But it does work, so you can give it a go if you're having trouble sleeping at night. Something to do, yeah. But a little bit of a warning here. At the end of the day, it's still people making the decision. You don't want to rely on an algorithm to make decisions for you. You can use additional levers, like your organizational strategy or your technology strategy. Yeah? And in the real world, what we recommend is to start with CD3 as an initial means to triage your incoming ideas, your demand, and adjust cost of delay to reflect your strategy. Don't adjust the CD3 scores. Adjust the cost of delay. And state your reasons for adjustment. That's very, very important. You have to communicate to the rest of the organization why you're adjusting the cost of delay. So this is a question that we often get asked. Why do we divide by duration and not cost? I don't know if you have the same question, but I always get asked. So in order to answer this question, we have to ask another question. In product development, which of these three is normally the most limited? Money, capacity, or time? Money? Who thinks it's money? No one? Anyone thinks it's capacity? Yeah, quite a few. Anyone thinks it's time? Okay, that's good. So money, you can beg, borrow, steal money. If you have a good idea, you will find someone who will lend you some money for your idea. Capacity, as we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, it is hard to scale, but we do have some flexibility. Time, you can't really replace time. You can't really reverse it. The hour you spend, or the day you spend here, it's gone, right? You can't get it back. So time is the most scarce resource in product development. So that's why how long will the pipeline be blocked is a very important question for us to think about. And this is the reason why we think about the duration. So we talked about using value and urgency to prioritize our ideas or schedule our ideas using CD3. And I would like to talk about how we can enable better trade-off decisions using cost of delay. So in my experience, the focus of the conversation between business and IT is most of the times focused on the cost. So we need to cut down on cost. How much is it going to cost us? It's always about the cost. But if we actually understand the cost of delay, we can make better trade-off decisions. So let's have a look at a few examples. So we have two different options. So we would like to deliver a feature. We have supplier A, which is going to cost more compared to supplier B, but it's going to take less time. So which one would you go for? Supplier A or B? I'm hearing some whispers, but it's okay if you struggle, that's fine. I'm kind of like missing a piece of information here. Let's say this is a must-have feature. Does this help to decide? Probably not. Let's say return on investment 300%. We have done some calculations, it's 300%. How about benefit cost ratio, 4.6? Can you decide now? Well, if you probably go for supplier B, that's going to actually increase the benefit cost ratio. You should probably go for the cheaper option. How about the safe way of prioritizing? Have you ever used the safe way of calculating cost of delay? Are you familiar with SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework? A little bit? Yeah, okay. So, well, the safe way is basically, you take business value, it's relative, plus time criticality, plus risk reduction. I have no idea why they add the time criticality, but it is still more relative. And risk reduction, again, relative. So it doesn't really help me to make this decision. Yeah? Okay. So let's get a bit more controversial. Hopefully you're not going to broadcast this presentation. Let's say it is classes of service expedite. Does it help? Well, it at least gives me a bit of indication of the urgency. Yeah? Urgency is communicated, it's expedite. Well, I'm not sure if I can make a decision. Okay, I'll basically save us from our misery. So let's say cost of delay is 10,000 per week. Now can you make a decision? Yes? Which one would you go for? A, yes, exactly. So now you have an understanding of the delay cost in your pipeline for different options, yeah? And you're minimizing the delay cost by going for supplier A. Do you want to try another one? One more? Okay. So let's say we're trying to allocate our resources onto this new project. We have an option of going with the offshore resource, which is going to cost us 5,000. Option B, local resource, which is going to cost us 10,000. So now you have cost of delay. Which one would you go for? Yes, B is going to cost us more, but it actually takes less time to deliver. If you look at the delay cost of delay is 10,000 per week. If we are getting this 2 weeks earlier, we're actually saving 20K in our delay costs, whereas it's going to only cost us 5K more. Yeah? Still with me? Okay, good. Okay, infrastructure supplier. So again, we have two choices. We can use our usual tier 1 supplier, or we can go with an alternative supplier, which is going to cost more, but it's going to take 3 weeks less than the usual supplier. You know your cost of delay, what would you choose? Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you don't make the cost of delay visible to your infrastructure teams, which one are they going to optimize for? Probably the cheapest option, right? Because they don't know the cost of delay of your ideas. So it is a great way of helping the whole organization to make the right decision. So we talked about how cost of delay and CD3 helps us focus on the value and make better trade-off decisions. What I would like to share a few results. So when we implemented this at Maersk Line, we thought it was going to be quite hard for us to get started. But in the end, it was not as hard as we thought. So what you can do is find one person, one team, one product owner who's willing to give this a try and start from there. And you will be very, very surprised that it actually goes viral. it went viral at Marsline. So we started with one of our biggest applications, and this was one of our first prioritization meetings. And what happened was very interesting, because we had like 20 items that needed to be prioritized, and we were talking about the priority in terms of relative. And the guy in the middle is actually the boss of the rest of the group, so he's kind of the chief product owner, you can call him. So he kind of picked one of the items and said, this is the most valuable, and he put it up on the top of the list. And after 2 hours, that one item that he said was the number one priority was actually number 9 on the list, when we started thinking about the value and urgency of our ideas and making our assumptions visible to everyone. The picture had changed. So that was kind of very revolutionary, I think, in terms of our thinking. And when we started implementing some of these principles and practices, when we went to the London teams, the product owners were actually very eager to get started, knowing what had happened in the previous team. They were very willing to get started. As you can see in this email, like, cost of delay was actually calculated before coming to our delivery teams for sizing. One of those things we said was, don't estimate the effort unless you know the value. So it actually worked really well. So we first think about the value. And even better, enterprise architecture team came down from their ivory tower and joined in the whole game. So they kind of like started estimating and prioritizing using cost of delay, which was very good. And in hindsight, I think we could have gotten them to use cost of delay earlier, which would have been very helpful for the rest of the organization. And suddenly, senior management language was changed. So this is an email that head of operations at the time had sent. So he's kind of like really angry why he's not getting this feature. The cost of delay for this change is USD X million per week. So now he's using the language as well. So we kind of like started shifting our focus. So we started talking about value instead of cost. And we have done a lot of other changes as well, which kind of shifted our focus from focusing on the scope to feedback loops, and from schedule to speed. So alongside all of these changes we have done, we kind of started seeing lots of improvements in our pipeline. So we were suddenly delivering faster. So this is not only due to CD3 or cost of delay, by the way. We have done lots of other changes in our portfolio by implementing lean and agile practices. So these are kind of the two biggest systems at the time we had. GCSS is the global customer service system, which handles 26,000 bookings per day. And SAP was our finance system. And to give you an indication of the size of these teams, GCSS is like 40 people in total, and SAP was like 100 plus people. So lots of product owners raising requests to these pipelines. And they were prioritizing using CD3 and cost of delay, yeah. So we were delivering a lot faster. We were delivering with better quality. Number of defects, delays, and patches went down. And we were getting more value of our pipeline. Unfortunately, we don't have a per application or per team basis for this data. So you can't really compare apples to apples. But if we look at the Marsline IT average, so across the whole portfolio, what the benefits per dollar invested was, and comparing to the aftermath, you can see that the benefit cost ratio went up. But at the very least, you can argue that the visibility of what was being delivered, the value of the things that we were delivering, have improved, because we were using cost of delay for our features. Yeah. And we were delivering cheaper. So as I said, just to state again, we have done a lot of different changes. So this is an interesting one, because now we shifted our focus from cost to value. It kind of like, we weren't really focused on cost, but we were actually delivering cheaper and more out of our pipeline. So in our view, if you focused on cost, your costs go up, unfortunately. And without the information about value in your system will optimize for other things, including cost. So that's kind of our learning. And along the way, we have found out a very interesting information about value that surprised us. So the distribution of value in our backlogs is not really linear. So if you look at the Moscow prioritization, everything ends up in the must-have bucket. But in this case, so this is the backlog of GCSS, that legacy application which I was talking about. So the top 25% of our requirements is actually 1,000 times worth more than the bottom 25%. The distribution of value in our backlogs are not linear, as the Moscow suggests. And in fact, it's a power law curve. So very few amount of requirements, a small number of features have a very high cost of delay and delivers the most value for your organization. And so that was, again, GCSS backlog. But when we moved on to different teams and different backlogs, again, the same shape. And we moved on to different organizations after Maersk Line, it is again the same shape. So it doesn't surprise us anymore. There are a very few number of features that deliver the most value. Yeah? And when I present this data, I always get the reaction of, okay, why can't we just deliver those top 3 and then forget about the rest? Well, you can't really do that, because the arrival of these ideas is actually random. You don't know when they will arrive, right? So arrival is random, so you can't really chop it off. And you can't really fix the scope up front and decide those are the top 3 and we will deliver and cut it off. You can't do that. That's why you need to kind of like have a different mindset. You need to acknowledge that product development is a journey of discovery. You will discover what the customer wants. You will discover how to build these things. And things will change along the way, yeah? And cost of delay quantified really helps with this, because just a categorization is not enough. It's not enough to say this is just expedite or this is a must-have. It's not enough. You need to understand urgency as well, but urgency profile is not enough either. And not just for prioritization. You can't just say this is for prioritization and forget about the other trade-off decisions you have to make. Which infrastructure supplier to go for, you know, which kind of like offshore or local resource. These kind of decisions will need to be made, and you need cost of delay to make these decisions. So we have learned that cost of delay helps with improving prioritization, making better trade-off decisions, and hopefully changes the focus of conversation from cost to value. So this is the end of the presentation. If you want more, you can go onto our website. There's a lot of free material. And we have an experience report, which we had written for the experience in Maersk Line. So you can have a look at that. You can download it for free. And if you have any questions, feel free to email any of us, me or Joshua. And yeah, if you have any questions, I think we have lots of time for questions, yeah? Any questions? No questions? Come on. You can ask anything. I know there are some finance people in the room, so you must have questions. Do you think you would give it a try? Do you think it would work in your organization? Do you think it would be hard to get started? No? Maybe? Yes? Yeah, it was actually. So the product owners didn't like it for the first pilot system. They didn't want to do it. But we kind of said, like, let's try it, and if this doesn't work, then we can actually like stop doing it. But then they saw the value themselves, because they were the first team that I talked about. They were like 10, 12 product owners that were prioritizing for the same team of development. So they kind of like found a way to communicate the value and urgency of their ideas. So they started, coming around and liking it. Yes?
So how do you combat the tendency from the business that operate your high jump? Because if you do that, you end up with people putting in the number that get their business case approved.
Yes.
So what blocks you from doing this with cost of delay? Sort of is going,
Yeah.
that guy has $1 million, I'll just put in $1.5 million.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, they make different assumptions. So the key is, I don't have that slide, but we kind of like built a reference table over time where people were sharing their assumptions when they came up with the cost of delay. So they come to the table. So it's not only about coming up with the number. They come to the table, like a weekly review, backlog review meeting, with their number and the assumptions behind. And you can actually get challenged by your peers about the assumptions you're making. And we then worked with finance to make sure that we are actually using consistent numbers in our estimations. So we also communicated that it doesn't have to be precise, it needs to be consistent.
So you end up with
reference table. Yeah, unfortunately I don't have that slide, but yeah, we came up with a reference table. For instance, the average FTE cost, 20K, that was defined by the finance guys. And they kind of like issued different data sets over time on a regular basis. So we kind of like reviewed our assumptions table over time as well. Any other questions?
What about estimating future value? I mean, that's often the case when you have two features and you need to choose one of them, and you have to make guesses, educated guesses.
Yes.
Still guess about will your customers actually
Yes.
buy this? What's the work?
That's a very, very good question, actually. I often get that asked, especially with increased revenue bucket. You're kind of like looking into a crystal ball. But the most important thing is, as I said, it's not about being precise, it's about surfacing assumptions. So once you surface those assumptions, then you need to go and design experiments to validate those assumptions you're making in your calculation. So a cost of delay actually engages system 2 thinking. You're engaging the left side of your brain to really surface those assumptions that you're making. Otherwise, it's about like hyper-prioritization or your gut feeling, whoever shouts shouts the loudest. Yeah.
We're working development, and sometimes you don't have a value. You just have to do it, so you move over something.
Yes.
Estimate.
Yes, that's a very good question as well. Actually, the 4 buckets come from government as well, the increased revenue, project revenue, the value buckets. My colleague Joshua was working in the Environment Agency. That's when he actually invented the 4 buckets. So, in order to do that, you need to kind of look at the impact you're making. Yeah, and we were able to estimate, put a value onto to public sector things as well. Yeah, it is possible. Yeah, yes. I mean, Maersk Line was heavily. Shipping used to be very regulated as well. We had lots of regulatory requirements, which we were able to quantify the value of. Yeah, we just need to. So, for instance, I was working with a housing association, social housing, in London very recently. So we look at, for instance, how many people we put into employment, and what's the impact of that to the UK economy. And if you can think about Sweden as in country as a company, then what is the impact on the macroeconomic level? We need to think about that. It is not easy to make that leap, but once we have done it a few times, it gets a bit easier. Any other questions? Yes.
So by that way of thinking, nothing is mandatory, everything's optional.
Mm-hmm.
Just price or taking a decision.
Everything is mandatory or an optional? Yeah.
Everything's optional, nothing's mandatory.
Oh yes, yes. It's all an option, optional. Yes. I mean, they are all options. In terms of the trade-off decisions, or I'm not. Yes, exactly. So you need to look at different options. Yeah. Any other questions? No. One more? Yes, one.
I know this is a hard one, but have you ever failed in introducing the system? I mean, there must have been cases where it didn't work out, or
Where it didn't work out. Yes. Branding is a very difficult one. Let's say we have a new branding. You can't do it on a feature level, page by page. But let's say you're redesigning your website and you're going to introduce a new brand. It's really hard. But you still communicate the cost of delay of not doing it. You can still communicate the value and urgency at a project level or an initiative level, but I wasn't able to do it on a feature by feature basis because at Merce Line we did it for every feature. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It was quite hard for branding. Anything else? But other than that, I have been able to quantify. I'm an economist, right? So I'm quite. Sometimes I find myself very arrogant to say I can quantify the value of everything. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. That's fine.